Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to this week's Better Managers Briefing. I'm Matt Roberts, Director of Membership here at CMI, and this week I'll be standing in for Anne Franca, hosting the Better Managers Briefing. I'm delighted to say that today I'm joined by two CMI companions from the world of higher education. So I'd love to welcome Steve Galliford, Director of Postgraduate Studies at Coventry University, and Jane Turner, OBE, Pro-Vice-Chancellor at Teeside University. Steve, Jane, very many thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, pleasure.
Great to have you with us. And so today we're going to be taking a look at the ever-changing university landscape that's been created by the COVID crisis of this year, and really looking to explore some of the challenges, but also the opportunities that this presents as we move, hopefully, towards a post-pandemic era. So it'll be great to get your insights throughout the conversation today, guys. For those of you that are watching us live, do remember that there'll be a chance to have your questions posed to Steve and Jane a little later in the show, and you can add your questions by simply typing them into the chat on the platform that you're watching us through. So to get things moving, guys, and perhaps if I come to you first on this one, please, Jane. How have you been managing to cope with COVID in your university thus far? And what's been the impact, do you feel, on the students and the university community at large?
Okay, thank you. Well, very well, actually, thus far. We have a narrative called Team Teeside, and it's very much been Team Teeside in action. Like Coventry, we've pivoted very quickly to online learning, but throughout we've prioritised well-being, safety and the health of our university community, and actually using those as compass points. That's very much driven our decisions and ultimately our offer as a university. And we've also very much come together as a sector too. We're members of the University Alliance and Universities UK, and there's been a real sharing of practice, so that's been a very positive experience. And then supporting our colleagues to work remotely, we've been very focused on employee engagement, pulse surveys to check in how our staff are doing, constant comms, making sense of what's coming from government, the U-turns, the shifts in decision, and trying to make sense of those for our university community. And I think we've remained calm and considered throughout. No hysteria, no hysterical moments, and just colleagues are working very long hours and very hard, and the student is at the heart of everything that we're doing. In terms, very quickly, in terms of impact, we've got strong foundations as a result of our future-facing learning strategy that we introduced 5 years ago. So we've got a mandatory digital development programme for teaching staff. So we've got a baseline of digital capability and expertise. We've got one of the largest one-to-one device deployments for staff and students in the sector, and a learning analytics platform that allows us to monitor student engagement with learning. And obviously we've focused very heavily on harnessing the student voice through, again, pulse surveys, module evaluations, meetings, constant meetings with students. And there's elements of that experience where our response has actually meant we've accelerated improvements and investments. So things we had on the back burner for maybe 12 to 18 months, 2 years down the line, we've brought forward. So that's really exciting. And we're managing to scale up services in innovative ways, which will benefit communities long term. So there's been a huge demand for our mental health and counselling support. So yeah, we've scaled that very quickly to enable us to support our student community. And I think this has allowed our community to feel confident and respond well to our approach. COVID does make university life very different, but from our observations in terms of well-being, our students have been most impressive in how they've responded and their resilience during this period. One thing that it has done is thrown a spotlight on the digital divide and the complexities that our commuter students face. Steve and I were just sharing views that there is a view that all of our students are full-time undergrad and living away from home, and we have a lot of commuter students, and many of them have had no physical space to study at home, or they've had to share their learning technology with other members of their household, children being homeschooled, and some have actually had to defer as a result of that. So some impacts, but overall I'd say we're managing and we're responding in a positive way, and we're learning as we go.
Fantastic. And I guess that just helps to illustrate for everybody watching today just how many facets there are to ensuring that the experience for students and for staff continues to be as positive as possible. Thanks, Jane. Steve, any further comments with regard to what you're doing with things at Coventry?
Thanks, Matt. Jane's mentioned lots of things that I could repeat, but I won't. I think we're also members of University Alliance, so I think Coventry and Teeside are very much of the same kind of breed and culture, and we tackled it head on from the very outset. A massive shout out to our Students' Union, who have been fantastic in this, and I'll perhaps say something about that later on in response to some of the other questions that I think may be coming. But we took a very, very early decision back in March to move online, which a number of other universities did not do, not mentioning any names. So all of our students have continued to study. They've got their degrees. We've assessed them properly, we've maintained our standards, and we've cracked on with it, really. Massive investment in technology. We had already planned to upgrade our virtual learning environment, and that, to pick up the point that Jane made, we've continued to do that, and actually that placed us in a really strong position, and that's enabled us to do that, I think, in a way which we probably couldn't have done as quickly, actually. But we're now operating from 8 a.m. in the morning till 10 p.m. at night. We are still teaching face-to-face. We made a commitment again early on when we came out of the first proper lockdown, if you like, that we would give all of our students a minimum of 5 hours teaching face-to-face if they wanted it, because we've also given the students the option to go online if they wish. And interestingly, around 85% of our students, and we test this every week, are preferring to stay on campus in a limited sense, which I think is a testament to what we've done to really retain that student experience. We're also operating on Saturdays from 9 till 3. We've always done that with part-time students, but we're doing that with our full-time students as well, because we clearly can't fit as many people into the rooms as we've used to be able to. So it's a real military operation, and I can't thank our estate staff, particularly our catering staff, enough. We're delivering food parcels, huge emphasis on mental health. And that's really the key thing for me, the issues that students are facing, potential loneliness. And as I say, a massive shout out to our Students' Union, who I'm a massive advocate of. I think genuinely believe they're one of the best in the country, and they do some outstanding work to support students, and we have a fantastic partnership with them. And that's something we're really aware of. Staff are working so hard and have worked so hard since lockdown. It's been incredible, the best I've ever seen in my career in HE. And people are getting tired, and students are under extra levels of stress. So we have something called Connections Matter, which I guess is our equivalent of Team Teeside, which is a kind of a platform for all sorts of connections of support for mental health, but also just general well-being and social activities as well, particularly for students. So it's been a huge shift, and I think I look back, thinking about this, the forthcoming conversation we were about to have, and thinking about the last 9 months. There's just been an incredible amount of things done, and I hope we're retaining that excellence for students, which is what we all care about.
Fantastic, and it's great to hear the way in which so many different people are playing a positive role in helping to deliver that great experience. I guess one of the things that characterises your universities is the variety of different external stakeholders that you have there as well. And so thinking about sort of government, whether it be at the local or national level, employers and your communities, what's gone well, perhaps also some reflections on what might have gone a little better, and what would you like to see for the future. Steve, perhaps you could give us your thoughts initially on that one.
I think there's probably two parts to the answer that I might give to that question, Matt. One's positive and one's a little bit less positive. In relation, I notice you ask about regional and local government as well, and I think our connections with other universities in the region, we're members of a West Midlands University group, which includes other big universities. We have a fantastic relationship with the City Council in Coventry. We're a big player in Coventry, and as I know, Teeside is in Middlesbrough, and our relationship with the city is fantastic. And we've worked really closely with them and the regional government as well, as a West Midlands Combined Authority consortium who we have connections with. And that positivity and close working relationship on a practical level has been really valuable. And that's a two-way relationship. We've also got a very close relationship with the Coventry and North Warwickshire National Health NHS Trust, who again we've partnered with, we work with. We opened up our labs early on. We were even making PPE equipment with our laser printers. So that's all been really, really positive. Great dialogue. Some of it very practical, to do with things like road closures in the city and using our facilities and us using theirs, and some really practical stuff, as well as the more strategic partnership. And that's been the way that we work through it, I think. And there's more of that to come with the forthcoming testing of students before going home at Christmas, which is a developing story, let's say. But and location of test sites and stuff. So really, really fantastic, and that close relationship is great. With employers as well, with students out on placements, changing those to virtual placements. Great, really. I'm afraid to say a little bit less positively is central government, where it could have been better because of really lack of clarity and consistency in some areas. And I know it's hard for them. Clearly, there's no rule book for this, but the guidance has been confusing at times and often changes at very, very short notice. And the point Jane and I have both made already about our population and our demographic, it doesn't fit what appears to be the norm as seen in Westminster, and that doesn't help. We've been running courses. We run 12 months of the year. We don't have a big summer holiday. We have different entry points. We have part-time students. We have mature students. And I think some of the central government guidance is a little bit, well, it doesn't take that into account. Jane's already said one size doesn't fit all. And that's been a little bit frustrating. So I have sympathy, because I know it's really difficult, but I think better clarity and more consistency would have been helpful, which is actually what we have had from local government, and that's been to our benefit and theirs.
Great. Jane, anything to add on to the points that Steve's made?
Yes, I'd just echo what Steve has said, but looking through the Tees Valley lens, we've had very positive interaction with our combined authority. We've got a metro mayor. We are the only university in the Tees Valley region, although Durham has a campus at Stockton, so it's very much us. So we take that responsibility very seriously. So in early April, we developed a joint business survey with the combined authority. We went out to the business community. We had over 1,100 responses, and that basically showed that there were three categories: those businesses that were likely to fail, those businesses that were likely to survive with significant support, and those businesses that were actually going to thrive or were thriving. So we've wrapped around a support package around each of those three categories and looking at sectors within those categories as well. We've had the mayor's very much lobbied for business funding to support multiple jobs. We've worked very closely with our funding partners in European funding to repurpose a lot of our European projects. So we've got a project called Grow Tees Valley that's helping businesses to innovate, very apt at the moment. And we've been working with local authorities on core priorities, one, for example, being digital poverty. And in answer to your question around what's gone well, that's an example of something that's gone really, really well. I was involved in conversations with a head teacher overseeing 5 primary schools in the Tees Valley region, very deprived areas, sharing awful stories of hardship. Particular family, 2 parents who were on 0 hours contracts, both lost their jobs, 4 young children at primary school. They had their washing machine repossessed, and the mother came into the school very upset because she couldn't wash the children's clothes and get them turned around in time. So the school bought them a washing machine. You know, the schools open and normally parents will charge their devices in reception and they can't afford the fuel bill. I mean, just terrible, terrible stories of hardship. So we've galvanized as a community, and we're putting together a campaign around digital inclusion. That would probably have taken about 18 months. That is now going to be in place from January. So that's that, you know, real positive example of collective regional leadership coming together. We've worked closely with the local authority, health protection team around being COVID safe, and really positive lobbying. We had the University Alliance, we had a call with the skills minister, able to position as the University Alliance members some positive lobbying around skills and what they need to look like post-COVID. The VCs have been engaged with key ministers, and I was involved in a Newsnight clip on Tuesday evening just around the Shared Prosperity Fund. European funds coming to an end of 2023. And the Alliance has put together an open letter to the Secretary of State for Business. And again, just an opportunity to positively lobby, and us coming together as a collective in a much more coherent way, I think, than we would have done ordinarily. And with the business community, they've just been very open because they just need support. They want answers. They want someone to be alongside them, just working with them. And again, that's what our role has been. And then finally, the 2070 Commission, the Mayor's commissioned a Tees Valley Task Force to come in and look at regional inequalities. So there's a call for evidence out at the moment. So we're on the crest of a wave of this levelling up agenda, and we're really passionate about that. We're challenging government around what that actually looks like and making sense of it from ourselves. What could have gone better, the U-turns in decision making, and as kind of the anxiety that can create for our community, and helping us to make sense of that for them. And the one thing I'd like to see is a much more strategic response for our young people right now. Northern Powerhouse launched a national tutoring scheme, opportunity for paid internships. A lot of apprentices have lost their jobs. And I was on a call yesterday with a number of people with the new president of the CBI, Karen Billamoria, and asking, can we get businesses to sign up to a pledge of how they'll treat young people? Because again, I've had lots of conversations with our young people who are applying for jobs and are not even getting a response that they've made an application. And it's so important that we treat our young people with respect and dignity right now. So some real positives have come out of it from my perspective.
Great, thank you. And both of you at times have touched on the way in which things that perhaps were in the planning and maybe you were looking to deliver over the next couple of years have been rapidly accelerated and delivered much more swiftly, which is great to hear. And with that in mind, in terms of both, I guess, the way in which you deliver learning and the student experience, what do you think are likely to be the lasting impacts of the ways you've had to change with regard to COVID? Steve, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and in certainly looking for positives out of this, one of the positives I've had is the move we have already made in different kind of pedagogy and teaching of students and using blended and online delivery. The death of the lecture, actually, if I can be so blunt, which I've been advocating for ages, certainly at postgraduate level. There's no need for 200 people sitting in a crammed into a room listening, in a passive way. Actually, what we should be doing is a much more active learning, pedagogy-based approach, whereby students are at the centre of their own learning. It's about interaction and using tutors, so that what we're in a really positive, interactive way. So what we're doing is using because we now have five hours face to face, which is a really, really rare and valuable resource, and it's not as much as students were getting before the pandemic hit. But that is like gold dust. So our approach is to really utilise that time effectively and get the most out of it. And that time is not best spent listening to tutors when they can get that information or those thoughts online in a virtual sense. It's that the value of that time is the interaction and the debating and the discussion and the thoughtful interactions that you can create in that. So that's a golden opportunity, and I hope that we don't go back to what we used to have. I was only half joking about the death of the lecture, actually, that we can utilize what we've learned, and we've made massive strides in our virtual teaching. You know, the way that our online platform is operating, we use a platform called Aula, which is slightly different to some of the others. We actually introduced it in September, so it's really hot off the presses. Whereby, and we were planning to do that anyway, but we didn't stop doing that. It's much more of a social platform, a social network-based platform, rather than a sort of modular, siloed-based approach that some of the VLEs use. And that, so the pandemic gave us the opportunity to really promote that and get the best out of it. And the support we've had to put into supporting staff is immense, and it was difficult to do because, of course, we're in a different world. But that I can't see that changing. I really can't, and I think that's beneficial, actually. In terms of the staff and work patterns, clearly we've moved to remote working. We're now in a sort of hybrid situation. We still have some staff working remotely. Others are back on campus at least part of the time. But I think we're learning the lessons that I'm sure in every organisation around the country and in the world are learning the benefits of remote working, the reduced travel time, the issues of connectivity and how that can be used usefully, combined with some face-to-face contact. So I think that legacy of the efficiencies some of the efficiencies that you get out of remote working, I think will stay, and I don't think will necessarily be the same way in which we use our estates. So we're looking at from our estates perspective about how we utilise our space and how we use our office space in a different way to maximise the space we have for students and reduce the real estate, or utilise our real estate in a different way, I suppose.
Great, thank you very much, Steve. I'm keen to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions from our viewers, but just a couple of other things that I'd love to get your views on today, guys, before we do throw it open. Jane, we know that COVID has had a disproportionately adverse impact on both women and people from ethnic minority backgrounds. Just wondered, in terms of your perspectives on what you think we could and should be doing to mitigate against those negative impacts continuing as we come out of the pandemic.
Yeah, and I'll just start with some statistics, actually, just to reiterate how serious this is. So new research just published by the BBC, just showing how hard the pandemic has hit Generation COVID, those aged 16 to 25, particularly young women, are feeling the full force of the fallout. And we know any crisis makes existing inequalities worse. But the impact on young women cannot be overstated. Women aged under 25 have basically been frozen out of the jobs market. I can talk about things that we're doing locally. So we've been working with the Girls Network, which is a national charity. We are running mentoring for 300 young girls aged 14 to 19 in the Tees Valley. I've been working at Teeside University for just over 5 years, and I'm also the gender champion at Teeside. And when I arrived, I was very struck by the lack of visibility of female leaders in the region, and have worked really hard in the last 5 years with partners and early adopters to just give a platform and a voice for women in the region. I've been involved with Simone Roche, who's the founder and CEO of Northern Power Women, and we produced a levelling up report a few months ago, and Andy Burnham launched it for us. And in there were 3 asks basically around female entrepreneurs and the support that we wanted from government, local government for them, how we support our young generation, particularly young women, but also increased asks to push the momentum for women having a seat at the table, a seat on boards. And we've just commissioned a postgraduate student just to go out and capture young women's voices in the region about how they're feeling right now and actually what they want. And again, the 2070 Commission talks about the levelling up agenda and the importance of equalities and addressing inequalities in region. Obviously, for young women, there are support networks out there in terms of Centrepoint, the Prince's Trust, Mind, the NHS, Refuge, lots of support mechanisms. But yes, young women who are already disadvantaged, particularly in our region, have been hit even more so. So again, as a university, taking a strategic lead on making an impact and making sure that we are seen as driving that agenda, because it is vital.
I completely agree. And for anybody watching, there's an opportunity to join us on Tuesday, actually, to celebrate 50 years of the CMI Women Network, where we'll be hearing from Alison Rose, amongst others. Alison, the group CEO of NatWest, and in many ways, the original male ally, Paul Polman, former CEO of Unilever. So anybody wanting to join us to celebrate at that event and hear from leaders with regard to that perspective, please do see the CMI website for more details.
That will be a great conversation.
Yeah, indeed. Steve, really interested in your views on this question too, and perhaps particularly with regard to what we need to do to make sure that not only do we enhance opportunities for women and girls as we come out of this crisis, but also for those from ethnic backgrounds that have also been very unfortunately disproportionately negatively impacted.
Yeah, and so it's fantastic to hear what Jane's got to say about that. I think it's really fantastic. We have a lot of BME students. We recruit a lot of our student background and our staff as well. Actually, we have an incredibly diverse population. I think at the last count we had students from 147 different countries, but also UK-based students. So it's very much an issue in the West Midlands, where there is a high proportion of people from BME backgrounds, and I think I'm hoping that this pandemic kind of allows that to be recognised more, because it's very clear what the evidence is in terms of the impact on certain certain groups of people, and to really raise that up the agenda. I mean, I was very interested, and we were in a discussion with people from the local health trust recently, just the other day actually. One of our Pro-Vice-Chancellors is on the board there, and the kind of irony of the so-called alleged priority list that might emerge for people getting the vaccine, which quite rightly targets people who are elderly and at high risk, and also targets frontline NHS workers, which is absolutely correct. Of course it is. But there's no reference to BAME in that at all, in terms of a prioritisation, which just seems a bit of an error, really, in the sense that we know that the rates are higher, and in the local region, in the local health trusts, that's an issue for them. So I think that I just hope that this becomes more practiced, and I think we're very conscious of it, and we do a lot, particularly go back to our students' union about prioritising that and extra support we're putting in place for students and working with the local community in terms of our facilities and resources, I suppose. I was going to actually touch back to a point that Jane mentioned about digital poverty, because I think that's relevant as well. Because that affects those groups of people a great deal, and we have noticed a massive amount of issues with that, and the response, go online, do this, from various people is very difficult for people who have no access to equipment. We've done a lot of work with investing in a massive batch of laptops that we can lend out to students who don't have access to proper equipment. They don't have private study space, which is very difficult as well. And of course, they may not have decent broadband connection, or any broadband connection. So that's the response that we as a whole country have to COVID in terms of remote working and remote study. I think greater thought needs to be put into that digital poverty. We have our policy, we put a policy in place, and we're doing what we can for our students, but more broadly, I think that needs to come much higher up the agenda. If this is the way of the future, if we're going to continue working and educating people using a blended delivery, we need to think about not everybody can suddenly get a new laptop or an iPad. So I think that's going to be definitely a higher priority.
Indeed. And look, I'm very keen to squeeze in a few questions from our viewers. So the first question comes from Daljit. And Daljit asks, how is the new year looking in terms of face-to-face delivery versus online? We've heard a little bit from Steve already on the face-to-face delivery at Coventry, but Jane, what's your view on Daljit's question?
Well, we committed to 4 hours teaching face-to-face thus far. And again, we don't know. We can plan for increasing that in the new year. This all depends on what the R rate's like. Do we look at regions? It's completely unknown. But be assured, and I'll speak for Steve here, that we will do our utmost to make sure that we give the best that we can give within the boundaries that we are facing. So we're planning for best case scenario, as we have done right throughout this, but we'll be planning for worst case scenario and somewhere in between. So we'd like to think, but again, I echo Steve, death by PowerPoint, death by lecture. This has given a massive opportunity to disrupt in a really positive way. And, that constant discussion around value for money for our students in terms of what they pay and what they get, and some really innovative opportunities for us to do something really creative in how we engage students in that learning experience. So we're planned for the best scenario, but unfortunately, we can't be definitive in that response.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Quick question from Al. Al asks, do you think that young people, and particularly students, have had a raw deal this autumn? And do you think that this could have been avoided with better leadership? Steve, what are your views on Al's question?
I think it's probably a mixed picture. I can only really speak for my own university, and I don't think they have had a raw deal. I think our response has been very clear from the outset. And we know that. We temperature check weekly. As I've already said, we've given all of our students the option to study online, but 85% of them prefer to be on campus, and they can choose. And we do have movement in that on a weekly basis. So they can go back as well. They can move back and forth. And I think that's quite a resounding thumbs up, really, to what we're trying to do. I think it's very difficult for students, and particularly, I can personalise it for a minute. I've got 2 children at university, and they're in their second, and one's in their second year, one's in their third year at the graduate. And I think it's been far easier for them because they've already got their network, they've got their support network, they've got their social network. I do feel sorry for first year students because it's a very, very different experience. Very different. We are working as hard as we can, and what Jane said, we will do our best. We always do. But I don't think they've had a raw deal, but I think it's difficult, and I do feel sorry. But we are doing our best, and I think we're getting there. I really do.
And just to add to that, just to be assured that vice-chancellors haven't taken these decisions lying down. They have come together as a collective. They have lobbied. They have influenced decisions. Trust me, they have influenced decisions. Hence some of the U-turns that have happened. So we are always absolutely passionately advocating for the student and their experience. Here, you talk to any of our colleagues in the sector. If there's anything this has done, it's made us even more determined to make sure our students get the best deal that they can get right now.
Great, thank you. One final question for today then. This comes from Jay. And Jay asks, what would you think are the most important leadership lessons that you've learned personally this autumn? And perhaps Steve, you can kick us off with that one, and then to Jay.
People is the leadership lesson for me. It's about, you can have all the technological solutions in the world, but the one thing I will take away from this is that the importance of being visible and making time to speak to my team and my people, both physically if I can now, which I can do, but back in March it was online. And I think something that I'm on duty tomorrow, actually, because we're teaching on Saturdays, as I've said, and I am one of the Deputy Vice-Chancellors who will be on site, walking the floor, just saying hi to everybody, you know, the people in the catering outlets, you know, that's all we'll do all day. We'll just wander around and say hi. And I think that's so important. And one of my team has actually I should be joining it shortly. They have a silly Friday half hour on Friday lunchtimes where we actually just take time out and have a laugh. We don't talk about work. We'll have a bake-off competition or a silly hat competition or something really ridiculous, and it's not a waste of time. It's the best half hour of the week because it keeps everyone's spirits up. And I genuinely, as a leader and as a senior manager, I think that it's made me realise that sort of informal time is really valuable and actually keeps productivity really high, keeps morale high. And I often say that there's time spent chatting to people is rarely wasted. So having to do that in a really different way, but I will keep all of that. So when we get back to normal, hopefully, I will keep all of those lessons about how you interact informally with your staff and with people. That's the key for me.
Great. And Jane, your views, what's been the most important leadership lesson for you this year?
Oh, well, CMI published some research this week called Managing in a Marathon Crisis. And the key headline was, it's not where you work that matters, but how you're led and managed. And that I just absolutely fundamentally agree with that. And the quality of that leadership is very transparent particularly during a crisis. I think trust is a key facet of leadership. I actually commissioned some research in May just to go out to leaders to find out what their experiences were of leading and leadership. And the word that kept coming through was around compassion and just the value of human beings and the importance of those relationships, as Steve said, and that need for trust. But also, I think we're more resilient than we think. And I know many colleagues were struggling with the boundaries between my home life and my work life. I mean, I had one of my team in particular, his four-year-old son popped up on his lap during a very important Teams meeting and said his mummy had burnt the pizza. And he was mortified. And it was just normalizing that, this is fine. This doesn't mean you're not being professional or you're not delivering. And I think as leaders that we've all struggled through this, and it's okay to show vulnerability. Otherwise, your team feel immense pressure to seem to be coping. And personally, for me, I've got cancer. I've got incurable cancer. I'm having chemo at the moment. So at times, I've just said to my team, I'm struggling a bit this week. I've just had chemo or not feeling great. And it's just those slight showing some vulnerability that you're human, I think is just so important. And I think as leaders, we feel this pressure to be invincible and to be, strong all the time. And that's not just being human. And I miss the face-to-face interaction because I'm on the critically vulnerable list, so I can't go into work. So I've been working from home since March. And I can't read the nuances now of what people are not saying. So it makes the Teams meeting, the Zoom meetings even more important. And I guess for leaders and managers out there, just to see this as an opportunity, however dark some days or hours might feel, people are galvanizing in ways that I've not seen before. And that's really exciting. And try to keep perspective on that. But we're not invincible, and mental health and looking after each other is really important, reaching out to helping each other and just being human through all of this. And just finally, I'll finish for our students that this is without doubt unprecedented, challenging, overwhelming at times, frightening. However, as we emerge from this, you're going to play a fundamental role. I'm talking about our young students here, our undergrads. You're going to play a fundamental role in building back. So I would really urge you to take this time to be sponge-like, absorb everything, learning, opportunities, read, work on yourself, sign up to courses, do what you can to supplement who you are, because we're going to need some really resilient, determined, focused, ambitious, passionate people when we come on the other side of this. And you guys are in a perfect place to build yourselves as individuals and be ready to contribute, because we're going to need you big time. So focus on the positives of what the future holds for us all. So.
Fabulous, Jane. Thank you. And what a note to finish on. I think that that's truly inspiring for what we should all be focusing on for the future in terms of building back better and the opportunities that are undoubtedly there for students from both of your organisations and far beyond, of course, as well. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us today and sharing your insights. I'm sure that the audience have taken away a huge amount of value from what you've had to say. Do join us on Tuesday afternoon on the CMI YouTube channel for the CMI Women 50th Anniversary celebration that I mentioned earlier on. And if you're not yet a member of the CMI community, then I hope that today has inspired you to find out more about us, and do click on the link that's in the description below the video. In the meantime, Steve, Jane, many thanks for joining us today, and we hope everybody has a great weekend when it arrives.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.